A frail old man in a wheelchair, a guy who needs a hand just to stand, looks at a cop dead in the eye and tells her he strung a grown 200-pound police chief up in a tree by the neck. And here's the thing, he isn't lying. Welcome to Watchmen. Not the movie, the 9-episode HBO one from 2019, the one Damon Lindelof built as a straight sequel to the 1986 comic, dropped 34 years later in an alternate version of Tulsa, Oklahoma. In this America, Robert Redford has been president for what feels like forever. Wearing a mask in public got outlawed, and a white supremacist gang in Rorschach masks calls itself the Seventh Cavalry. A few years back, they hit cops in their own homes on Christmas Eve, a night everyone just calls the White Night. So now the police hide their faces too. Everybody in this show is behind a mask. Almost nobody is who they say they are. Oh, and underneath the pulpy comic book stuff, it's secretly one of the sharpest things ever made about American racism. So it swings between a man in a full panda costume answering phones and the real, historical 1921 Tulsa Massacre. Buckle up. We start in 1921, Greenwood, Tulsa. People called it Black Wall Street, the wealthiest black neighborhood in the country. A little boy sits in a movie house watching a silent black and white western where a black lawman rides into town and brings a crooked white sheriff to justice. Then he walks out of the theater into the end of the world. White mobs flood Greenwood. They loot the stores, they torch the houses, and airplanes come in low overhead dropping firebombs on the neighborhood. This actually happened. Hundreds of black residents were murdered and the entire district was burned to the ground. The boy's parents shove him onto a truck fleeing the city, and right before it pulls out, his mother places a surviving baby girl into his arms. The truck doesn't get far before it crashes. The boy drags himself out of the wreck, finds the baby somehow still alive in the dirt, and picks her up. Remember him, we come back for him. Cut to present-day Tulsa, 2019. A cop pulls a pickup over for a routine stop. The driver swears he's just hauling lettuce and cracks a joke about wanting to see the cop's face, since the cop is the one wearing a mask. Then the officer clocks a Rorschach mask sitting in the glove box and everything changes. Here's how policing works now. To even draw his gun, the cop has to radio dispatch and get his weapon remotely unlocked. And dispatch, a guy whose entire head is a giant panda, makes him answer a threat level questionnaire first. High probability of firearms? High. Perceived threat? High. Just unlock the gun, man. There's a delay. It doesn't take the first time. And by the time his weapon is finally live, the driver has already opened fire and dropped him. The cop, Charlie Sutton, ends up in surgery fighting for his life. That's the system. Slow enough to get you killed. Meet our lead, Angela Abar. Her cover is that she's a retired detective who runs a bakery. Her actual job is masked cop, and her getup is a nun's habit with a black balaclava, and she is very willing to beat a confession out of you. They call her Sister Night, the nun with a gun. She rules. Her excuse for leaving the force? She tells folks the government reparations program bought the bakery. And in this timeline, that program is nicknamed Redfordations, because Redford. Yeah, the show is exactly like this. At home, she's got a soft-spoken, gentle husband named Cal and 3 adopted kids. And there's a whole running gag where tiny squids periodically rain down out of the sky and everybody just grabs a bucket and cleans them up like it's weather. Which, in this world, it kind of is. Angela does not wait around for permission. She already kicked in a cavalry suspect's door and threw him in her trunk before the chief even gave the order to round anyone up. Her boss and friend is the chief, Judd Crawford, an old cowboy type who runs the department. When Judd calls a weapons-hot sweep of a shantytown named Nixonville, and somebody warns him he's making a mistake, he just shrugs and says it's his funeral. Hold that line. They haul Angela's suspect into an interrogation booth called the Pod, run by a jumpy detective in a mirrored mask who goes by Looking Glass. He flashes Rorschach images and reads the guy's eyes, and the pupils blow wide open on every single one. Yeah, he's one of them. And you cannot reason with these people. Their whole gospel is that they are nobody and everybody at the same time. So the cops raid the cavalry's actual hideout, way out at a cattle ranch. Before they roll out, they chant their little motto, a bit of Latin that boils down to the old question, who watches the Watchmen, which they proudly answer with, we do. Big, ugly shootout. And these clowns even have a plane. Judd runs the whole thing from the air. They catch the guy who shot Officer Sutton, but before anyone can question him, he crunches down on a poison pill and dies right there. 2 more slip away into the dark. Great. There's also a trashy prestige drama satirizing this world called American Hero Story, hyped in the universe as the most important television event of the new millennium, which is a big swing for a show about people in capes. It's all about the original masked heroes from decades back, including the very first one ever, a hooded figure with a rope around his neck. It comes with a content warning so long it's basically a comedy bit. the government helpfully flagging it for graphic violence, racism, hate crimes, and roughly every other thing at once. Hold that hooded guy in your head. Then Angela gets a page and drives out to a single oak tree standing alone in a field. Her friend, the chief, is hanging from it, dead. And parked in a wheelchair right at the base of that tree is an elderly black man who very calmly tells her he's the one who put Judd up there, which is impossible. He says he's 105 years old. He can barely move. He also scolds her for cursing too much. But he isn't running, and he isn't sorry. Hold on. It gets stranger. Quick jump back in time again, now to World War I. A black American soldier is in the trenches in France, fighting for a country that treats him like a second-class citizen the second he gets home. The Germans drop propaganda flyers on the black troops, and the pitch is pointed. Why bleed and die for a nation that won't let you vote, won't let you sit where you want, won't treat you as fully human, when the men you're shooting at never did any of that to you? He keeps the flyer. That soldier matters down the line. Back in the present, Sister Night doesn't turn the old man in. She hides him because he's claiming to be her grandfather, and because he keeps hinting that her beloved dead chief was sitting on something ugly. She asks him how a man in a wheelchair lynches a full-grown adult. He tells her, straight up, that maybe he's secretly Dr. Manhattan, the big blue god who lives on Mars. He's messing with her, probably. Then his family tree gets confirmed the dumbest way imaginable, by an automated call from a reparations heritage program that cheerfully informs him his granddaughter is Angela Abar. They bury the chief. At the memorial, Angela meets Senator Joe Keene, a folksy shucks Oklahoma politician running for president, the type who insists you just call him Joe. He offers her every resource she could need to catch the killers. Real friendly guy. Afterward, she searches the chief's house and finds a hidden panel. Behind it is a Ku Klux Klan robe. Her friend, the chief of police, and in the old man's words, it was way too easy to find. That's the ugly secret he was dangling, and she's just standing there holding it. No jokes here, that one lands like a fist. Okay, now for the completely deranged side of the story, the one running quietly underneath everything. Every so often we cut to a fancy old British lord living in a massive countryside manor, waited on by servants he treats like set dressing. And this guy is staging a play, specifically an elaborate theatrical reenactment of how Dr. Manhattan became a god. The whole watchmaker turned glowing blue deity origin, starring his identical servants, a Mr. Phillips and a Miss Crookshanks, who he orders to weep real tears on command. When the servant playing the lead finishes the scene, his body gets dumped in the cellar with all the others, and a fresh, identical servant is promoted into the exact same role. This man cycles through disposable clones for fun. In his own head, he is the smartest man alive, allegedly. Where is this estate? What year is it? Who even is he? The show flat out will not tell you yet. It just keeps cutting back to him being ridiculous and daring you to be patient. It pays off, trust me. And then the old man in the wheelchair, he tells Angela not to bother arresting him, since his friends in high places will spring him anyway. And right on cue, a craft drops out of the sky, lifts him straight up in the air, and he's gone, taking Angela's parked car up with him. Yeah, that's gonna be a problem. New player, Special Agent Laurie Blake, FBI, and she is the human eye roll, cynical, sarcastic, completely finished with everyone in the room. Her job now is hunting vigilantes, and her intro is a masterpiece. She stages a fake bank robbery as bait, waits for some caped hero to swoop in and save the day, then arrests that hero for the crime of wearing a mask, because that's illegal now. The poor sap in the cape, who calls himself Mr. Shadow, never sees it coming. She drags along a starstruck fanboy aide named Petey, a total comics lore nerd she treats like a puppy, plus an actual pet owl named Who. Here's Agent Blake's whole deal. There's a special phone booth that beams voice messages up to Dr. Manhattan on Mars, who happens to be her ex, and she keeps calling it to leave him one long bitter joke, like a prayer she doesn't believe in. It's about God standing at the gates of heaven, judging dead masked heroes one at a time. An owl costume guy, a smug genius, and a blue god who won a war, and sending every single one of them straight to hell. The punchline she's crawling toward is that once all the heroes are damned, even God ends up down there too. She doles it out in pieces across the whole hour, and by the end she isn't really joking anymore. She's grieving a guy who's been sitting on another planet ignoring her for 30 years. Also, and the camera makes real sure you catch it, she travels with a large blue battery-powered novelty item shaped like a certain famous blue man. Subtle, Laurie. She rolls into Tulsa to take over the chief's murder, instantly locks horns with Sister Night, and can smell that Angela is hiding something. Which fair, Angela is hiding an entire grandfather. And then the punchline of that heavens joke shows up, literally. Angela's stolen car, the one the old man rode up into the sky, comes screaming back down out of the clouds and slams into the pavement right outside the police station. God snaps his fingers, and the hero drops. Told you she was working through something. Because there's a trillionaire out there building a skyscraper-sized clock in the middle of Oklahoma, a bottle of pills that will drop Angela straight into memories that aren't hers, and the single biggest fake monster sitting back in 1985. So, let's meet the trillionaire, Lady Trieu, the richest person on the planet, carrying a god complex the size of the tower she's building. And she is building a tower, a skyscraper-sized clock looming over Tulsa that she swears is much more than a clock. She opens by knocking on a farmhouse door in the middle of nowhere and offering the old couple who lives there, the Clarks, a deal. She'll trade them a baby, a custom genetically built baby grown from their own DNA, with a $5 million payout thrown in for relocation in exchange for their land. They're horrified and tell her to get out. And then, right on schedule, something drops out of the sky and slams into their field, because Trieu already knew it was coming. Suddenly, the deal looks a lot more reasonable. That's Lady Trieu in a nutshell. She doesn't ask for what she wants. She just already knows how the story ends. She's also got a teenage daughter named Bianne, who feels a little off in a way the show isn't ready to explain. Plus a whole philosophy that the only thing that outlives you is your blood. Nobody knows what the giant clock is actually for. She isn't telling. She just wants you to look up at it and understand she's operating in a completely different weight class than the rest of us. File all of it under ominous. Over in Tulsa, Agent Blake has parked herself in the dead chief's old office, which is a great way to get an entire department to hate you. The stolen car that fell out of the sky gets dusted for prints, and one set doesn't match anyone on file. So Blake runs them through the FBI database and gets a hit. A former New York cop named William Reeves, retired decades ago, who by her math has to be over 100 years old. And how does a man that old get around? A wheelchair. She's already circling the old man, and she can tell Angela knows a lot more than she's saying. And the cops catch their first glimpse of the single dumbest hero in the entire show, a guy in a shiny silver suit who squirts lubricant all over himself and slides feet first down a sewer grate to get away. They find the puddle, shrug, and christen him Lube Man. That's it. That's the whole character. I love him. But here's the actual twist. That frail old man in the wheelchair, the one who claimed he hanged the chief, is not some lone lunatic. He's sitting inside Lady Trieu's compound, working with her. The pills he slipped into Angela's life, a banned drug called nostalgia, aren't random either. They're his own memories, packed into a capsule. His plan is to make Angela live his life instead of just telling her about it. And he quietly admits that he betrayed his own granddaughter to pull it off, and that in 3 days she's going to know exactly what he did and hate him for it. Yeah, hold on. Now the show stops everything and hands a full hour to the saddest man in Tulsa, the detective in the mirrored mask, Wade Tillman, Looking Glass, the human tinfoil hat, and by the end of this, you understand exactly why he lines his hat with anti-psychic foil. Rewind to 1985. Wade is a teenager, a nervous door-knocking Jehovah's Witness from Oklahoma, dragged along to a carnival across the river from New York City. A pretty girl takes an interest in him, walks him into a funhouse full of mirrors, and it's a setup. She and her friends strip him down, steal his clothes, and leave him standing there alone and humiliated in the dark. And that is the moment that saves his life. Because while he's trapped in that hall of mirrors, across the river in Manhattan, a creature the size of a city block appears out of nowhere. When it lands, it lets out a psychic scream so powerful it kills half of New York in a single instant. Wade stumbles out of the funhouse into the aftermath, a teenage kid wandering through the dead. He lived because a wall of mirrors and a river stood between him and that scream. He never recovers from it. Decades later, he's a paranoid wreck who runs a support group for other people who survived. And yes, he wraps his head in foil, because in his world, a psychic monster once erased a city and might come back. He's so far gone, he keeps a lie detector close and can barely trust a soul, which is a problem, because the cavalry have already worked their way right up next to him through someone he trusts. Except it can't, and that is the cruelest part of the whole thing. Because the cavalry get their hands on Wade, and the man in charge of them turns out to be a very familiar face. Senator Joe Keene, the aw-shucks politician from the funeral, has been running the entire 7th Cavalry this whole time, and he happily admits it, right down to the detail that Crawford was his partner in the operation. Then Keene shows Wade a video, a confession. And the man on the tape is our pompous lord of the manor, finally with a name, Adrian Veidt, the self-declared smartest man alive. He recorded it for President Redford, and on it he calmly explains that the monster that killed half of New York in 1985 was never real. He built it. He engineered the entire thing, dropped a fake creature in the middle of the city, and let it slaughter a population on purpose, so a terrified world would stop fighting each other and finally choose peace. 3 million people died to scare the planet into behaving, and it worked. So everything Veidt has been afraid of for 34 years, the trauma that shattered him, the monsters he's been guarding against with a foil hat, was a lie told by one man who decided he knew better than everybody else. You watch a person's entire life cave in on itself in real time. It's rough. And where is the smartest man alive now? Not ruling the world, in a cell. It turns out that fancy manor with the disposable clone servants is a prison, and Veidt has been trapped there for 4 years, pitching tantrums. His grand escape plan is to load frozen clone corpses into a catapult and fling them up into the sky, one after another, hoping they'll spell out a message somebody up there might see. He gets caught, obviously, by a masked jailer called the Game Warden, and hauled off to stand trial. The smartest man alive, allegedly, losing a wrestling match with basic physics. The show never stops finding this hilarious, and neither will you. But Keene didn't play that tape for free. In exchange, he orders Veidt to serve Angela up to the FBI, or the cavalry will roll up to her house and murder her entire family. He calls it a squid pro quo. Veidt folds, so the cops close in on Angela, and in the middle of the bust, she grabs the old man's bottle of pills and swallows every last one. A massive overdose. Her body locks up, her eyes go wide, and she drops into a coma, and that is where she lives his whole life. The show shifts into stark black and white and drops Angela directly inside her grandfather's memories, sometimes literally standing in his place in the middle of a scene. This is the beating heart of the entire series, so there's no jokes here, not one. His name is Will Reeves. In the 1940s, he became one of the first black police officers in New York City. At his graduation, an older cop warns him with 3 words: "Beware the Cyclops." Will has no idea what that means yet. He finds out fast. He catches a white man named Fred setting fire to a Jewish delicatessen, arrests him on the spot, and then watches his own white colleagues quietly let Fred stroll out the door and tell Will, to his face, that he must be imagining things. The message could not be clearer. The badge means nothing for a man like him. And while they're brushing off the arson and telling him he imagined it, the white cops are casually chatting about a new comic, a story about an alien baby rocketed to Earth to grow up and become a hero, completely blind to the actual hero standing right there in the room with them. Then it gets worse. A group of his fellow officers grab Will off the street at night, drag him out, and string him up by the neck with a rope, only to cut him down at the last second and leave the noose behind as a warning. And on the walk home, still shaking, he pulls that same hood back over his own head and stops a mugging in progress, saving a couple who never see his face. The next morning, the papers are calling the mysterious hooded stranger a hero. His wife June sees what he can't. June, who we learn was the baby he pulled from the burning wreck back in 1921, she reminds him of the silent western he watched on a loop as a little boy. The one where a hooded man in black lassos a crooked sheriff clean off his horse and then throws the hood back to reveal Bass Reeves, the black marshal of Oklahoma, who refuses to let the town lynch anyone. Trust in the law, and then June turns the knife. The townsfolk cheering for that black hero was all white, and the theater where little Will watched that movie over and over was one of the buildings the mob burned to the ground in 1921. So she tells him the truth flat out. He is never going to get justice with a badge. He'll get it with that hood, and if he wants the public to keep cheering for their hooded hero, they have to believe a white man is underneath it. So Will paints white makeup around his eyes, and hooded justice is born. The very first masked hero, a black man forced to hide his own face just to be allowed to be a hero at all. The other costume heroes, the Minutemen, welcome him in. Their leader, Captain Metropolis, real name Nelson Gardner, becomes the love of Will's life, another thing Will has to keep hidden, because those same heroes would never accept who he really is under the mask. It's a secret with a target on it. Crooked cops tied to the Cyclops figure out exactly who Hooded Justice is, corner him, and try to blackmail him with a compromising reel of film of him and Nelson, threatening to expose both his race and his relationship if he won't take off the hood. The man can't even be a hero in peace. Then Will figures out what the Cyclops actually is. It's the Klan, and they've built something monstrous. They're running rigged film projectors in theaters, flashing a hypnotic strobe that plants a voice in black moviegoers' heads, commanding them to hurt each other, manufacturing riots to justify the hate. Will begs the Minutemen to help him shut it down. They laugh him off. Mind control from the Klan? Ridiculous. Not their kind of case. They tell him to go handle black unrest on his own. So he does, alone, and it costs him everything. June can't stand what the rage is doing to him. She takes their son and leaves for Tulsa. And here is the answer to the question we started with. Will kept the Cyclops mind control technology. Decades later, a 105-year-old man in a wheelchair used it on the chief of police, a man who kept his own grandfather's Klan robe in a closet and called it his proud family legacy. Will put him under, walked him out to that tree, and calmly told him he could hang himself now. And he did. That's how it happened. It was never a trick, it was justice, nearly a century in the making. Because while Angela lies unconscious reliving all of it, the sweetest, most harmless man in the entire show, the patient house husband she goes home to every night, is about to turn out to be the very last thing anyone would ever guess. Angela wakes up strapped to a hospital chair inside Lady Trieu's compound. She overdosed on her grandfather's memories, and now the trillionaire is flushing them out of her skull, using the old man himself, hooked up by a tube, as the donor. As the borrowed memories drain, Angela's own start surfacing, and they are the worst ones she has. Saigon, when she was a kid, her parents killed by a bomb at a street celebration, right in front of her, moments after telling her they'd be right behind her. Then a grandmother she never knew she had, June, flying in from Tulsa to take the orphaned little girl home. And then, before they can even leave, June has a heart attack and dies too. Angela loses her whole family twice, one loss right on top of the other. That is where Sister Night comes from. There's a bitter thread in it too. Her father spent her childhood warning her to be afraid of people in masks, because a masked man had terrified him when he was a boy. That masked man was his own father, Will. Angela grew up on the warning, without ever knowing where it came from, and she became the exact masked thing she was raised to fear. While she's coming out of it, Trieu casually drops a couple of things. First, her teenage daughter, Bian, isn't her daughter. She's Trieu's dead mother, cloned, with the mother's harvested memories fed back in through an IV drip while she sleeps. Cool, normal, healthy. Second, and bigger, Dr. Manhattan, the big blue god everyone thinks is sitting on Mars, is not on Mars. That's a decoy. He is right here in Tulsa, walking around as a human being. And the Seventh Cavalry is about to grab him, destroy him, and take his power for themselves. Will went to Trieu because stopping that took a trillionaire's resources. Then Trieu points out that Angela never asked the obvious question. Who is Dr. Manhattan pretending to be? She didn't ask. She already knows. She goes home and tells her sweet, gentle, memory-wiped husband, Cal, that the car accident that erased his past 10 years ago never actually happened. It was a lie the two of them built together so they could be together. His name isn't Cal. It isn't even the name she calls him when she's scared. She says she's sorry, and then she takes a hammer to his forehead. Cal is Dr. Manhattan. The device buried in his skull kept a literal god convinced he was an ordinary man for a decade. Angela cracks it out, and the patient house husband turns blue right there in front of her. Same face, same love, just omnipotent now. His first words, "Hey baby, we're in trouble." He's not quite himself yet, drifting through the 10 years he just forgot, not even sure what year it is. The kids come tearing downstairs screaming that there's a blue man standing on the swimming pool. Yeah, that's Dad. Meanwhile, Agent Blake has actually cracked the entire case. She's pieced together that Will is Hooded Justice, and that Chief Crawford was a secret member of Cyclops, and she takes it to Judd's widow, Jane. Bad move. Jane is Cyclops too, and Senator Keene is waiting with a trapdoor and a cage. So the shucks senator finally lays out his real plan, and it's bigger than the president. He's not just going to destroy Dr. Manhattan. He's going to absorb the big guy's power straight into himself. In his words, being a white man in America is hard these days, so he figures he might try being a blue one. The original plan was smaller, just murder a bunch of cops, force everyone into masks, and ride the chaos into the White House as President Joe. But the second he learned an actual god was hiding in his state, the presidency started looking like small potatoes. Okay, deep breath, because now the show runs the most ambitious hour in its run, and it does it out of order on purpose. Dr. Manhattan does not move through time the way we do. He experiences every moment of his life at once, all the time. So this jumps around and you just have to write it. Quick origin, because it matters. Back in 1959, a mild physicist named John Osterman, son of a watchmaker, got locked inside a radiation chamber. It atomized him. And then slowly, he rebuilt himself, piece by piece, into a naked blue god who feels every second of his own existence happening at the exact same time. That's the man. That's why talking to him is a nightmare. 10 years back, 2009, Saigon, a bar, the anniversary of the war. Angela is there, a cop, and she despises Dr. Manhattan. Here's why. Decades earlier, Nixon sent him to Vietnam, and he showed up 100 feet tall and torched the place. A little boy watched his whole village go up. That boy grew up into a furious man, built a bomb, and that bomb is the one that killed Angela's parents. So when the actual blue god strolls up to her wearing a Dr. Manhattan mask to blend in, she hates his guts on principle. He tells her they're going to fall in love, marry, move to Tulsa, adopt 3 kids, and get 10 good years before it all ends in tragedy. He isn't guessing, he already lived it. She calls it a party trick. So he tells her the exact song about to hit the jukebox. It does. It's called Tunnel of Love. And it becomes their whole life, 10 years in the tunnel. She still isn't sold. She dares him to prove he's a god by creating life right there on the spot. So he grows something out of thin air. She's unimpressed. A chicken would have been better, she tells him. But she likes him. That's the thing about Angela. A blue god who can see the future and torched her country walks up to her and she still gives him a hard time in a bar. To have a normal life with her, a god needs a normal face. So he takes one from a man who just dropped dead with nobody left to miss him, a guy named Calvin Jelani. And the amnesia device that lets a god forget he's a god, that was Angela's own idea. She's the one who suggests wiping his memory so he can just be her husband for a while. The car crash was the cover story they invented together. It isn't all sweet. 6 months in, they have their one real fight. And it's about exactly this. Angela finally snaps that a man who knows the whole future can't possibly understand fear or risk, that he is never scared of anything. He tells her she's wrong. He is scared right now, because right now for him is also 1959, and he is standing in that chamber feeling his skin burn off his body, and he always will be. He never stops living the worst moment of his life. Neither of them ever really leaves the tunnel. The device itself came from the one man petty enough to build it, Adrian Veidt, the smartest man alive, allegedly. Manhattan pays him a visit in Antarctica, and in exchange for the gadget, grants Veidt a wish. See, Veidt thinks he saved the world back in 1985 and nobody knows it, and he's desperate to find out if he'll ever get to see his utopia. Manhattan tells him yes, just not here, because Manhattan built a paradise on Europa, a moon of Jupiter. He waved his hand and grew an entire living world in about 90 seconds. A lush garden with a manor house and 2 adoring servants he knitted from the water. And here is the quiet gut punch hiding under this whole ridiculous castle subplot. That manor is a copy of the one where a Jewish refugee boy named John Osterman and his father sheltered while fleeing the Nazis in 1936. The couple who took them in made young John promise that one day he would create something beautiful. Europa is him keeping that promise, 70 years and 390 million miles later. So Manhattan hands Veidt the key to heaven, and Veidt happily says yes please. Then the smartest man alive spends years up there flinging frozen corpses at the sky, trying to escape the paradise he begged to be dropped into. He took Eden and turned it into his own private hell. Perfect. Now buckle all the way up, because this next part is the whole show folding in on itself. While Manhattan is turning into Cal back in 2009, he also goes to visit Angela's grandfather, Will, to form an alliance for her sake. And since he lives all moments at once, he's talking to Will in 2009 and Angela in 2019 at the very same time. So Angela in the present tells him to ask Will a question. How did Will know Chief Crawford was secretly Cyclops? How did he know about the clan robe hidden in the closet? Manhattan passes it back to 2009, and Will has no clue who Crawford even is. Until that exact second, because Angela just told him. Her own question, fired back a decade through a blue god, is the thing that put Judd Crawford in her grandfather's sights in the first place, which led to the robe, which led to the hanging. Angela kicked off the entire mystery she spent the whole show trying to solve. Chicken, meat, egg. They showed up at the same time. Back in the present, Manhattan is calmly making waffles while a truck sits parked across the street with a tachyon cannon on the back, built to teleport him away and kill him. He tells Angela flatly that it cannot be stopped and there's nothing either of them can do about it. She refuses to accept that and charges out to fight anyway. And that, he tells her, is the exact moment he fell in love with her. Not because she can win, because she will try to save him even knowing she can't. Here's the sad math underneath all of it. Manhattan built a whole world full of beings whose only desire is to worship him. And that infinite, guaranteed love is worthless to him precisely because it cost them nothing. He crossed 390 million miles of space to be loved by one real difficult mortal woman who gives him grief in bars, instead of by a heaven that adores him on command. Heaven wasn't enough, he says, because heaven doesn't need him. One last thing he does before the end. Back when they were young, she tells him she never wants kids and never wants his powers. So instead, he quietly locks his abilities inside an egg. If somebody eats it, they can walk on water. He leaves it for her anyway. Because everyone still standing is about to converge on that giant clock at once. The Ashuk senator still intends to make himself a god. Veidt is finally getting hauled home from his moon, and there's an egg sitting in Angela's kitchen that a dying man left her on purpose. Time to find out who Lady Trieu actually is. Flashback years to Adrian Veidt's fortress in Antarctica, where a young woman shows up uninvited to pitch him. She calls herself the smartest woman in the world. She has come to tell the smartest man alive, allegedly, that his life's work is a rerun. He saved the planet in 1985 with a fake squid, and he has been quietly dropping smaller fake squid ever since just to keep everyone scared. It worked, sure, but she calls it small. He froze the doomsday clock 20 years ago, and then never took the next step, because deep down he is only a man with limits. Her idea is bigger. Make every nuclear weapon on Earth simply vanish, and for that, you need someone with no limits. You need Dr. Manhattan. She has already tracked his radioactive signature to a moon of Jupiter. Her plan is to catch him, destroy him, and pour his power into herself using a giant machine she calls a quantum centrifuge. Then she will disappear every nuke, end starvation, and clean the air. All the things a real god should have done and never did. She just needs Veidt to spot her $42 billion to build it. Why would he? Because she says she is his daughter. Veidt scoffs. He has never so much as touched a woman. And then she points at the refrigerated vault where he keeps his, let's call it, genetic material. Her mother was a Vietnamese refugee named Bien who cleaned his labs in 1985, injected herself with one of his samples, and slipped out into the night. And Veidt never noticed because she was just the help. Trieu is the result, his genius stolen. She has even cloned that dead refugee mother and keeps the copy at her side as a teenage girl named Bien, quietly feeding the original memories back in. He tells her she will get nothing from him, and that he will never call her daughter. So she waits him out. When Manhattan later dumps Veidt onto the Paradise Moon, Veidt spends years spelling a distress signal with the frozen corpses. Cropped it reads, "Save me." The full message reads, "Save me, daughter." And the daughter, watching from Earth, finally comes to collect him. Not to save him, to make him watch. Everyone converges. The cavalry has Dr. Manhattan trapped in a cage, and here's the payoff to a thread running quietly all season. That cage is built from synthetic lithium, and the only place to get synthetic lithium is old watch batteries. So these clowns melted down a mountain of them just to build a box a god cannot escape. And here is how they found him in the first place. On the White Night 3 years ago, one of their guys drove off to shoot cops in Tulsa and then called Keene, baffled from a payphone in Gila Flats, New Mexico. Somebody had teleported him hundreds of miles in an instant. There is exactly one person who can do that, and it just so happens Dr. Manhattan was born in Gila Flats. That was the tell. A god was hiding in Oklahoma, and the Crawfords spent 3 years cozying up to Angela's family to get close to him. And in case you were wondering what these people actually want, Keene lays it out. In their telling, Veidt's puppet president Redford took away their guns and spent decades making them apologize for the sins of the past and for the color of their own skin. So they cooked up a culture war they secretly controlled from both sides, planning to ride the chaos straight into the White House. Racism with a folksy grin and policy platform. Senator Keene has Agent Blake tied up in the audience, specifically because she used to be Manhattan's girlfriend, and he wants someone who loves the big guy to watch him die. Keene strips down to his underwear for the big ceremony, because becoming a god apparently has a dress code, and gets ready to melt Manhattan down and drink his power. Angela crashes in and tells him to stop, that whatever he thinks is about to happen will not, because Lady Trieu has been planning her version of this a lot longer than he has. Keene doesn't listen. He flips the switch and pulls a god's raw energy straight into his body, and he pops, like a water balloon. Turns out you can't absorb atomic power without filtering it first, which Keene would have known if he weren't a moron in his underwear. So much for President Joe. That is when Trieu teleports the entire room to her clock. She lets Keene do the hard part, catching Manhattan precisely so the god would not see her coming. Then she reads the rest of the Cyclops leadership, Judd's widow Jane included, a formal condemnation for a century of racist terror going all the way back to the 1921 massacre, tells them flatly that they are going to die for it, and starts draining Manhattan into her centrifuge instead. Manhattan knows he is finished. The cage scrambles his sense of time even worse than usual, yanking his mind randomly through his own life. So when Keene asks him what year it is, the god answers 1985. He can barely stay in the room. Before he goes, he does two things. He teleports Angela's 3 kids to safety into the arms of her grandfather Will at the old Dreamland Theater, and he teleports Blake, Looking Glass, and the others all the way to Antarctica, to Veidt. He keeps only Angela with him, not to protect her. She begs him to fight, and he tells her he cannot hold himself together, and that the reason he did not send her away with the others is simple. He does not want to face the end alone. She refuses to leave. He drifts off mid-sentence into every moment they ever spent together, all at once. And the last thing he says is that he loves her. Then the most powerful being on the planet is just gone. But Manhattan did not ship his friends to Antarctica for nothing. At Karnak, Veidt looks at Trieu about to ascend and decides, with absolute zero self-awareness, that anyone who reaches for the power of a god has to be stopped at all costs. Blake points out that he is describing himself, a man who murdered a city to force his own idea of utopia on everyone. He does not care. It takes one to know one, she tells him. Stopping a god from being born is, apparently, a job only another monster will take. So he takes those harmless little dissolving baby squids, freezes them solid first, and fires an entire storm of them down out of the sky onto Trieu's clock like a machine gun from heaven. 5 square blocks obliterated. Lady Trieu dies with Manhattan's powers seconds from her fingertips, killed by her own father raining frozen calamari on her head. So the finale's answer to a woman trying to become a god who saves the world is the same man who once slaughtered a city to save the world, doing it a second time to stop her. Nobody in this story has clean hands. This show, man. With that done, Veidt hands Blake and Lookingglass a vintage airship to fly home and figures the adventure is over. Blake informs him he is under arrest for murdering 3 million people in 1985. He laughs, says she has no proof, and she holds up his own filmed confession to Redford. He points out that arresting him means arresting the president too. She shrugs and says sure, why not? When he starts monologuing about how he saved mankind again, somebody finally clocks him over the head and shuts him up. The smartest man alive, finally quiet. Back in Tulsa, Angela finds her kids safe, asleep, and her grandfather sitting with them. Both gods are gone now, hers and the world's. Will tells her the kids don't know much, only that a blue man zapped them across town and that the old man watching over them is family. He is finally in Angela's life. Then he tells her the rest of it. He is sitting in the very spot where almost 100 years ago, he watched a movie in a theater his mother played piano in, a theater the mob burned down to the ground in 1921. The last thing he saw before his world ended was a black lawman 15 feet tall on that screen, telling him to trust in the law. He took that hero's name. He became a cop. And then, understanding exactly why that hero hid his face, he hid his own. Then Will says the thing the whole show has been building toward. When Angela had his memories and felt what he felt under the hood, she thought it was anger. It wasn't. It was fear, and it was hurt. A wound you keep covered up never gets the chance to close. That is what the mask really costs. And he is not only talking about himself. Angela has spent her whole life armored up as Sister Night, in a habit and a balaclava, running from the exact same grief her grandfather ran from. He is telling his granddaughter to take the mask off before it eats her the way it nearly ate him. He passes along one last thing Manhattan left her, a line the blue man swore she would understand when the time was right. Something about how you can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs. Angela has no idea what it really means, not yet. She takes her grandfather home. And then, quietly, alone, it lands. The eggs. Way back in that bar, Manhattan told her he could pour all of his power into a single egg, and that if a person ate it, they could walk on water. He made that egg. He left it in her kitchen on purpose. Angela opens the fridge. She takes out the egg, she eats it. She walks to the backyard pool, looks at the perfectly still water, and lifts one bare foot out over the surface. And she steps down. Cut to black. The instant before we get to see whether she floats. That is the whole show. A grieving woman at the edge of a swimming pool, 1 foot in the air, finding out whether or not she's a god. Because that was always the quiet complaint about Manhattan. He had all the power in the world and he mostly used it to hide in a nice house with someone he loved. Maybe she does better. Maybe she doesn't. We never find out. Watchmen never tells you if she floats, and honestly, that is the most Watchmen thing it could possibly do. The story just keeps refusing to fully close, which is the whole point. 9 episodes, 1 perfect impossible final shot, and a limited series that genuinely meant it when it said limited. If you stuck around all the way to the pool with me, you're my kind of person. Go watch the thing if you haven't, rewatch it if you had. Like and subscribe and all of that jazz. And I'll catch you next time.